Okay, so something that just happened was I attended an online web seminar, a webinar about the use of psychedelics as a sort of psychiatric medication. And it was surprising to me that it was even a subject because I'm very used to thinking of psychedelics and drugs in general as poison to the body, as something that no one should ever touch, ever, ever. And, you know, so to hear of it being legitimized, the use of it being legitimized as an actual form of medication was very interesting to me, especially since now that I think about it, there are sources I've read where people talked about how these sorts of drugs, unfortunately, they accessed them maybe illegally or under questionable circumstances, but that they found them very therapeutically helpful. And, people such as myself who are used to the conservative narrative on drugs um, tend to cast these sorts of stories as just excuses for using the medication. But, if there is research to indicate that it really works, and this is what they were talking about, that there is real evidence that psychiatric drugs, psychedelics could be used as psychiatric drugs in the future to actually help people. And trials, but there's limited trials because currently there there is very little way for clinical trials to happen because, of course, those sorts of drugs are completely illegal, and so it's very hard to make money off of the concept, and so there's this limited research, but the research that has been done definitely shows it to be helpful. And you know, with that being the case, it's a lot to take on. Obviously, this new idea, it's a very new way of looking at psychedelics. And, that I'm still kind of shocked that because I'm so used to thinking of it as poison, and you know, it did give me some controversy in my mind because you know in the Bible, Christians are instructed to stay away from drunkards and to not be drunkards themselves. And so, yeah, again, Christians are used to the idea of you're not meant to allow yourself to be intoxicated. But then I think about it, and being a drunkard, is very different to the strategic use of a psychiatric drug. It both will affect your mind, of course, but, being a drunkard, is usually a disorderly thing where you end up committing illegal activities and you end up peeing on yourself and you make yourself terribly sick, you end up with liver cirrhosis, you lose your home, you lose your family, you end up with a lot of social problems, whereas presumably the controlled use of psychedelics would yield the opposite results. It's a controlled thing, and so it's not going to be the same. I would imagine. And yeah, this one of the things that was said in the seminar that really gave me a lot of personal food for thought. I don't know that I want to personally pursue psychedelics for myself, simply because even if I cease to think of them as a poison, I understand them to cause a loss of control. And to me, the loss of control is terrifying to think about. Uh, and I realize that in of itself, maybe that's all the more reason for me to pursue such a thing. But, the thing that they talked about as the desirable result of using psychedelics in conjunction with other forms of therapy, of course, is that it helps the mind to become a little more plastic and it helps the person, the patient to relax and to have less of the fight or flight response. And it helps them to be more open and more trusting, and therefore therapy is better capable of helping them. And, you know, it, yeah, I'm not accustomed to thinking of my own fears themselves as the enemy, like as fear itself as being a barrier to well-being. But now that I stop and think about it, maybe that is why the Bible says so many times not to be afraid. You know, I mean, even in the course of them saying that, one of my immediate thoughts was, oh, so basically they're drugging me up so that they can get into my head and mess with me. And, you know, like, of course, being that all therapists are humans, there's always the potential for abuse. And that is that is one of my predominant reasons for not wanting to see a therapist. I am concerned about handing over my mind to another person. But it does mean that my opportunity for being helped by these people is also sadly cut off. And yeah, so it does make me wonder whether, I mean, at the very least, I have to consider that maybe I should change the way I understand fear. That maybe I should stop thinking of it as a friend who protects me and to start thinking of it more as this sort of jailer that keeps me from living to my full potential and living the life that I really ought to have. And if I think about it, yes, a great many of the worst decisions I've made have come from a place of anxiety. A great many of the lost opportunities I've had in life have been down to me kowtowing to fear instead of doing what I really believed in. And if I think about the progress that I've been able to make as a person, whether professionally or personally, it's all been down to my ability to overlook fear and act despite it. And, I mean, I think that a lot of the predominant problems I'm suffering from right now really are just situational. So I'm still not necessarily inclined to seek out that sort of thing. To me, it's still sort of, I don't know about it, but I do think it's a good thing that they are willing to look into these things, at least to find out whether or not they can help people. And, the predominant thrust of their arguments were, well, the current system we have isn't unilaterally helping everybody. It's actually offering people very limited help. The current system we have is clogged up with people who need to sometimes wait 2 years before they can get help from a therapist anyway. And there are people who have been suffering from depression for decades, even though they've tried so many other ways of dealing with it. And yeah, I mean, one of my fears about taking on medications is my fear that I'll end up just hooked on it forever, that I'll never be able to get off. And, yeah. But you know what I mean? If they mean that they're going to use the medications as a gateway so that these people can get other forms of help that might actually solve their problem, then I think that's something I could understand and get behind. I don't know that it's for me, don't know who it's for, but I think it's good to have an open mind, perhaps, and just, it's obviously going to be the right thing for some people. Otherwise, it wouldn't be helping people in the trials. They wouldn't be having successful trials of these drugs. So, yeah, it was just very surprising to me. And, I think a lot of people would be very surprised, and I think it's going to be controversial. Because obviously there's so many people who, like myself, grew up with that mentality of drugs are poison. And, psychedelics are drugs, and therefore psychedelics are poison. And, obviously it gets a bad rap because it's so commonly associated with illegal activity, but again, if it's being used within a controlled medical environment, then it's harder, I think, to justify objecting. I think so. But again, it's all conjecture until, the law permits it, isn't it? But yeah, again, I think the takeaway for me from all of that is just how important it is, perhaps, to say no to fear, to look at my fears and go, no, you're not my friend helping me. You're not a legitimate way of thinking. You're actually causing my sickness. And yeah, because like I said, a lot of the bad decisions I make come from a place of fear. And I think that's going to be true for a lot of people. And I feel like, that's a lesson that anyone can take away, really, that you really need to ask yourself, are my fears helping me, or are they holding me back and keeping me in unhealthy patterns? And keeping me from being able to make the very positive changes I need to make in life, It's all valid questions.